Howdy, with this video I want to go over the doublespeak essay and the concept of doublespeak. This may take a while, so feel free to pause the video if you need to and take a break or just shut me up for a few seconds. First, to go over the schedule real quickly, it's pretty simple from here on out. Doing this video on the 5th for this Friday. You should be watching this video. And kind of really start thinking about essay number 4, getting started on the next journal entries. For class time next Tuesday, journals 10 through 12 are due. And hopefully you've kind of thought about your topic and what you might want to work with the doublespeak essay, particularly that primary source you're going to need for the essay. And you're hopefully going to get ready to start writing on it. We'll work on the essay for the 15th, continue in class on the 19th. Want to take a look at where you're at, make sure you're making progress, not getting stuck on this. Don't want to get stuck on this essay. We're down to the last 3 weeks, right? So we don't have much extra time. Then on the 22nd, we'll continue working on it. Drafts due when we come to class on Tuesday. We'll do the peer reviews, and the essay's due on the 29th. Then on the 3rd, we'll meet one more time for the final exam. The final exam is going to be pretty quick, just a review of the course, nothing you have to study for, anything like that. And you'll also receive your graded doublespeak essay back and know your grade for the class, pretty much. So and that's about it. That's it for the course. So we're kind of hopefully headed a little downhill. It's not an easy essay, but hopefully just having that light at the end of the tunnel kind of keeps you motivated. The doublespeak essay is up there on the content page. For this essay, we're going to talk about doublespeak, and there's a definition there. You're going to hear this definition a few times. But doublespeak's language that pretends to communicate but really doesn't. Makes the bad seem good, the negative appear positive, the unpleasant appear attractive or at least tolerable. In other words, it's language that's used to manipulate us to think certain ways, believe certain things, or maybe not think about certain things. Sometimes language kind of forces you to, just your brain just shuts down sometimes, right? Particularly when the language gets overly complex and technical. It's also language that avoids or shifts responsibility. It's not quite matching what's being said. It's not matching the reality it purports to express. And you want to kind of see if the language is matching what's happening or the facts that are surrounding it. So basically, it's just people using language against us to get us to do things. And you're going to write a 1,200-word essay that examines a primary source. You're kind of the investigative reporter that's going to go through this primary source and show us the doublespeak at work and the various types of doublespeak and why you think they're doublespeak and the effects that doublespeak has upon the listener or viewer. And by primary source, what I mean is you have to find an actual source using the doublespeak. So if you want to do Barack Obama or Donald Trump, any president, it doesn't matter. You don't want to just have, I don't want to see you using an article from someone who's telling you about President Trump's doublespeak. I want you to go to a President Trump speech, a primary source with Trump actually talking, and then you'll take us through the speech and show us the different types of doublespeak and how he's using doublespeak. And again, this could be any politician, Obama. Every president does this because they have to kind of explain bad things, and when somebody screws up, they got to get on TV and find a way to say it without it sounding quite as bad as it might actually be. Likewise, if you're going to do a drug, you want to find a specific advertisement for that drug company, for that specific drug, and take us through the doublespeak that's happening in that advertisement. We'll get into possible topics here in a little bit. But your primary source is going to be one of the things on your works cited page. You're going to have two other sources, at least two other sources. One's probably going to be this William Lutz book. I'm going to post part of it up there on D2L for the definitions of doublespeak and the other terms. Then you probably kind of have one other source. That kind of depends on you. May have to look up some of these words. Or you may have to get some more background on the actual event that's being discussed or whatever. It kind of depends on your primary source. But in your essay, you're going to define doublespeak and the other forms of doublespeak, and then give us examples of those types of doublespeak in your primary source. We're going to have a long quote, short quote, summary, and paraphrase, all the fun punctuation. Don't use it or got, avoid I and you in this essay. This essay is kind of pushing you away from personal experience that we've kind of been doing with the first few essays. Every once in a while, a student latches onto a topic where they can use I, but for the most part, you want to avoid it. No, none of this. I personally think that, or I think this, or I will do this. Generally, in formal humanities essays, you kind of take the I out of it. Uh, it's kind of a rule they made up back in the day. But anyway, also kind of limit your use of to be verbs is an R. Sometimes that starts creating some logic problems in your writing. You can choose either APA or MLA format. If you're going into nursing or the health field, I strongly encourage you to do another APA essay. You may not like APA, but when you get into the nursing program, that's what they're going to want. And they won't care about MLA anymore. So if you're heading towards the nursing program, please, I strongly suggest you do that. I'm not going to force you to. If this is your last English class and you're comfortable with MLA, you can go with MLA. But make sure you pick one or the other. Don't try and do both at the same time. But if you do choose APA, I'll add 5 bonus points to your grade. Just kind of a little enticement there. That's kind of up to you. Again, if you're going into psychology or sociology, getting practice with APA is super important. So I strongly encourage you if you're going in that direction. But that's kind of how the essay is going to work. We'll talk about this more in class on Tuesday. Maybe start looking at a sample essay and stuff. But for right now, I just want you to kind of get a sense of what doublespeak is. I'll give you examples of the various terms. If you want to pause the video now, this would be probably a good place to kind of go like, also, it's a good time to pull out the handy-dandy guided lecture notes I gave you in class on Tuesday. If you weren't in class on Tuesday, that's attached to the email that took you to this video. Alrighty. Let me get this going. But just like it says here, often when we use language, language can be a loaded weapon. We try to manipulate other people. We try to get them to see things a certain way, avoid responsibility when we do something wrong. This is kind of a natural part of language. And doublespeak is going to start tapping into that kind of idea. Beyond the idea that we just use language to say things to each other, we use it to control each other, manipulate each other. It can get kind of sinister when we get into certain areas. A lot of these ideas are coming from George Orwell's book 1984, and in the novel 1984 it was called Newspeak. But the idea is that you actively use language to control how people think. And Big Brother is the main entity in 1984. Had 3 main mantras that the government put out. One is war is peace, the other is ignorance is strength, and the last one is freedom is slavery. Why does America spend so much on a military budget? I mean, is Canada gonna invade us or something? What are we defending here? But we want to have a strong military so that we can maintain the peace. That's the logic, right? So our ability to wage war brings us peace, theoretically. Kind of an interesting idea. Why do various entities want to block websites we can go to and protect us from ourselves? Because that kind of freedom can lead to slavery. We don't want to be enslaved by our own desires and whims. So these ideas may seem kind of contradictory, and that's kind of the idea of them. The ability to hold these contradictory ideas in our head and still function the way Big Brother wants us to is one of the functions of Newspeak, and it's certainly part of doublespeak. So if you want someone to blame, you can kind of blame George Orwell, although doublespeak's been around forever, right? Cain saying, am I my brother's keeper, trying to use doublespeak on God to get out of the punishment for killing his brother. A good example of doublespeak, right? And God sees right through it, obviously, in the Bible story. It's a good example. And there's all kinds of whatever text you want to get into. Already read the definition from Letts. I'm not going to read that whole thing to you again. But 3 main points to remember is that language can be used as a form of manipulation to obscure unpleasant facts and events. Language can be used to avoid or shift responsibility. And we should start looking to see whether the words that are being used agree with the facts that are being discussed. And again, that's kind of what you'd be doing in that primary source. It's kind of saying that the words this person's using or this drug company's using or whoever don't quite match up with the facts that are kind of pretending to be presented. All right, a couple of quick examples. If you think about the abortion debate, if you just start listening to the language that people use, you're going to start seeing which side of the argument they're on. If you start hearing the term like unborn child, or somebody saying I'm pro-life, they're using this language to one present their view. I'm pro-life as a kind of suggesting that if you disagree with the person, they're pro-death. But also a term like unborn child, it's kind of an odd term if you think about it, because we don't generally define ourselves by what we're not. We're not the undead or anything like that, right? The ungraduated students or something like that. It's a very precise term designed to kind of manipulate how people see a fetus and the implications of abortion. If you're on the other side, you're probably going to be talking about reproductive rights. You're going to be pro-choice, implying that people who disagree are anti-choice, right? When you talk about an abortion, you're probably going to talk about unviable tissue and procedures. And it's going to kind of change the moral implications of what's happening. And both sides use language to control how people think about the fetus and the events surrounding abortions. So whatever side of the debate you're on, hopefully you can start seeing how language is used to kind of manipulate how people think. In education, when they first started doing these standards of learning tests way back in the day, teachers balked, naturally. We don't want to be judged by the scores of our students. And the teachers union in Southwest Virginia said, this isn't fair. You can't judge us by our students' test scores because we're working with the challenged population. And if you think about that term challenged population, it's an excellent example of doublespeak about shifting blame. If the students get low scores, whose fault is it? It's not the student's fault. It's not the parents or the teachers or the schools or anybody's. It's the whole population's fault that they have low scores because they're a challenged population. What do they mean by challenged? That's a very, very unpleasant term if you really start thinking about it. And how do you solve these problems? Do you just take the entire population out of Southwest Virginia and replace it with some other people, or what are you going to do? So excellent use of doublespeak, but also you can kind of start seeing the sinister motivations behind some of this doublespeak and trying to control how we think about things, or kind of limit what we can think about things actually. We're going to talk about 3 types of doublespeak. Euphemism, jargon, and weasel words, inflated language. And again, these are on your little cheat sheet here. But when you start working with your primary source, you're going to take us through these different types of doublespeak. You're probably going to separate out weasel words from jargon, because those are quite often a very obvious feature of doublespeak. But you're going to take us through the primary source, show us how that source uses euphemism, jargon, weasel words, inflated language, and that primary source. To define some of these terms, a euphemism is an inoffensive or positive word used to avoid a harsh, unpleasant, or distasteful reality. We do this all the time. If someone dies, we have all these phrases, they went to a better place, or they passed on, to kind of avoid the harsh, reality of death. That's not really doublespeak because everybody kind of knows what's happening there. However, if you get called into the office from you by your boss, and they start talking about how the company is going through some restructuring, they're using doublespeak to make something seem not so bad, and what's about to happen is you're about to get fired, right? But of course, no one ever gets fired, particularly if you work for a large company. You might be, forced into involuntary early retirement programs, which again means you're fired. You might be experiencing labor force adjustments, restructuring, downsizing. In 2017, Northeast State had to fire about 40 people, and our president at the time called it right-sizing. So we right-sized 40 people right out of a job. In education, teachers are never fired. We're just not renewed. Sometimes in government, we just lose a position, but of course the person in the position has lost their job. So it starts to become doublespeak when the language starts to cover up what's happening. And and it can get more sinister with the euphemisms. Um, Sometimes in war, we got to talk about what the military does. Uh, they don't like to often don't like to say, "Hey, we killed these people," particularly if the wrong people get killed. But quite often, targets are acquired, serviced, and converted. So we're not. Are we killing people, or are we just converting targets to a different state of being? And you start using, you hear these phrases, and it's sometimes hard to understand exactly what's happening. And that's the point of the euphemisms. They're trying to change how you feel about an unpleasant reality. Quite often, our military doesn't bomb people; they use air support. We don't attack people anymore. We use preemptive strikes. Preemptive strike means I'm going to hit you before you hit me, right? And that's what an attack is quite often. So sometimes you'll see these phrases, used to kind of put a better light on a very unpleasant reality. And of course, if the wrong targets are serviced due to friendly fire or and collateral damage occurs, all these terms indicate something really bad happened, right? Friendly fire means we shot one of our own guys, which happens in war. I mean, it's not always cut and dry. It's very confusing at times, obviously. But so we start using these euphemisms to kind of describe when mistakes are made. If you bomb the wrong target, you might create some collateral damage. The targets you converted might be civilian targets, and you might be caused by incontinent ordnance. In other words, it's the bomb's fault. It fell on the orphanage or whatever. So, like when you start listening to what's happening in Ukraine, particularly the Russian side of events, you're going to start seeing some of this language creeping in, and how they describe some very unpleasant realities, and try and put euphemisms in front of those to make them seem not quite so bad. Some more euphemisms of war. If a soldier is sacrificed by the government, we're taught to say that he or she gave their life for the country, or they made the ultimate sacrifice. Kind of an interesting kind of euphemism there, because it's implying that it's the soldier's choice to be put in harm's way when it's actually the government that puts these soldiers in the harm's way, right? Nobody wants to die for the country. In fact, what's the Patton quote? The goal of war is to make the other guy die for their country, not die for your own. And we all use these terms, but sometimes it's kind of interesting to see how the blame's getting shifted a little bit. Who's responsible for these deaths? And it can get a little frustrating. Right? If we're going to put our best people in harm's way, they deserve an accounting for the decisions that put them there. And of course, we're kind of the good guys. Our military is far more open than those of other countries that may enact purification programs or re-education programs or resettlement programs. You don't want to be resettled or re-educated, right? But these are nice euphemisms to hide a very, very unpleasant reality. One of the more obvious governments entities using the euphemisms, the Nazis in World War II. If they offered the Jewish people a chance at resettlement, particularly resettlement to the east, these people were in trouble, right? They were going off to the death camps. So they used euphemisms like resettlement to the east. This is the gate at Auschwitz, Arbeiten macht frei. Work will make you free. And of course they did, because they worked everybody to death, right? So very, very just sinister, evil use of euphemism. We kind of sometimes see, like, when we get fired or we get restructured, we kind of know what's happening, maybe, maybe not. But it can get even more sinister. It's when people try to kill you, they're going to start using some of these terms. And of course, one of the ultimate euphemisms, the final solution, the death of millions and millions of people in World War II, covered up or kind of explained through a euphemism there. So it can get kind of sinister at times, and when you start thinking about topics, it may not be quite that level with the Nazis and stuff, but you might end up picking a topic where something bad happened and everybody tries to explain it away. Another type of doublespeak, jargon, specialized language of a trade, profession, or similar group. It's not always, we use jargon all the time. Every job has their own kind of jargon to speed things up. If you go to the emergency room and you're bleeding all over the place, they have a language they use. Give me this statin, so they can get things done quickly. They're not trying to hide anything. They just need to speak, in a certain language so they can move quickly. But sometimes jargon starts to become doublespeak. If you go to the hospital and experience a negative patient care outcome, and you have a terminal episode, and that's how they write it up in the paperwork, the hospital is using jargon to explain why you died, right? And if it was due to excuse me, a diagnostic misadventure of a high magnitude, that means the doctor screwed up and killed you. But hospitals don't want to say that because of lawsuits. So they're going to start using this jargon to kind of hide what happened. Sometimes when plane crashes, they're insured. The airline's got to account for the money coming in, even though 200 people just died in a plane crash. So they have to explain that, particularly on their paperwork. So they might say that the plane experienced an involuntary conversion. And that's why they collected this insurance money. And that jargon starts to become a little bit sinister. They're trying to hide something, shift the blame, and all of a sudden the jargon becomes doublespeak. One special type of jargon are weasel words. Weasel words are words that qualify whatever comes after them. For example, I can tell you if you can make it to the end of this video, I can guarantee that this video will help you become a millionaire within 3 years. Guaranteed. No doubt about it. That word help in there, that it will help you become a millionaire. Help is a weasel word. It qualifies everything that comes after it. So if you come back to me in 3 years and go like, hey, where's my $1 million? I'm going to say, I just said it'd help. I didn't say do it. And then you'll be like, Mr. Fish used doublespeak on me. That's what weasel words do. Words like helps, fights, crest helps fight cavities. No claim at all there. You can say anything you want after helps, fights. Crest helps fight venereal disease or whatever. I said you can say whatever you want, basically. Things that control things. Don leaves dishes virtually spotless. Virtually means it leaves them spotty, right? They're literally saying it does not leave them spotless. Because you're virtually a millionaire right now, aren't you? When medicine say this treats this disease, it's not a specific claim. Treats is a weasel word, and they can say pretty much whatever they want after it, or works to do something. And we're going to start looking at some advertisements so we can start seeing these weasel words in action. This first one's a Zoloft commercial.
You know when you feel the weight of sadness. You may feel exhausted, hopeless, and anxious. Whatever you do, you feel lonely and don't enjoy the things you once loved.
Notice with this commercial, there's a lot going on right away. One, they're trying to get you to diagnose yourself with depression. They want you to go to a doctor and start asking about Zoloft, right? Because these ads are coming up on TV, and they're not geared towards doctors; they're geared towards patients. You got this little egg-shaped thing. If you choose to do an advertisement like this, you're definitely going to get into the visuals. A lot of people spend a lot of time in rooms and spend a lot of money to come up with this little egg-looking thing, and it's supposed to mean something to us on some level. We got the bluebird of happiness there. We got the cloud over the little egg person. So a lot going on. Getting a very vague definition of depression.
Things just don't feel like they used to. These are some symptoms of depression, a serious medical condition affecting over 20 million Americans. While the cause is unknown.
All right. When you start watching an ad like this, while the cause is unknown, they're saying we don't know why depression happens, but we got the drug to cure it, right? Or to treat it. They're not going to say it cures it. They're going to go to this visual here. These aren't what actual nerve cells look like obviously. When they put dramatization down here, they can draw pretty much anything they want. And you're going to see with something like Lyrica, I think it's a fibromyalgia drug. They do these dramatizations that are very fancy, right? They look real, but they have that little dramatization down at the bottom, and creates a very interesting effect. But they still haven't made a specific claim about this drug, right? In fact, they actually said, we don't know what causes depression.
Depression may be related to an imbalance of
May be related. May is a weasel word. It may or may not be related, right?
natural chemicals between nerve cells in the brain. Prescription Zoloft works to correct this imbalance.
Works to correct doesn't mean it does it. Works to correct are all a bunch of, they stringing these weasel words together, and they're not making any real specific claim about this drug so far. We're about halfway through the commercial. They haven't said really anything at all.
You just shouldn't have to feel this way anymore. Only your doctor can diagnose depression. Zoloft is not for everyone. People taking MAOIs or Pimozide shouldn't take Zoloft. Side effects may include dry mouth, insomnia, sexual side effects, diarrhea, nausea, and sleepiness.
And notice the side effects may include, they've done clinical studies. They know how often these side effects occur, but they don't want to throw out those percentages because they might stop people from going to their doctor and asking for Zoloft. So again, we're 3/4 of the way through the commercial, and they haven't said a thing about this product that you can really pin them down on, right? Because they keep using these weasel words, the may or may not, works to correct, and they're not saying anything about this drug.
Zoloft is not habit forming. Talk to your doctor about Zoloft, the #1 prescribed brand of its kind. Zoloft. When you know more about what's wrong, you can help make it right.
Right, then we get this meaningless phrase at the end. When you know more about what's wrong, you can help make it right. Again, that help is a weasel word. It doesn't say we're gonna make it right. We're just gonna help make it right, and it doesn't really mean anything at all. So an entire 30-second commercial. They spent millions of dollars producing this thing to get the blue bird of happiness here, and the cloud disappears, and you got the little egg person. But the entire commercial doesn't make a specific claim about the drug in any way whatsoever. But they do a lot of innuendo so that you think it does. So very, very interesting commercial. Very excellent use of doublespeak if you're into the evil side, the dark side. So when you're thinking about a topic, if some people are like, I want to do Trump, or I want to do Obama, or Biden, or whoever. If you're not that interested in politics, you might consider a drug advertisement like the one I just showed you. You can start with the TV ad, then you can move on to the website and expose the doublespeak involving the product there. When you go to websites, Vyvanse is an ADHD medication. And you're going to notice Vyvanse is for the treatment of ADHD. For the treatment of are weasel words. It's not for the elimination of ADHD. It just treats it, which is not a specific claim. Now they've started selling these ADHD medications to adults. And you can just start getting into an entire website. When you start looking at some of these websites, when you see like patient portrayal, it's a child model, right? It's not an actual kid with ADHD. Quite often, when they start marketing this towards parents, they show that they tend to show kids doing homework. That's one of the big battles with kids with ADHD. But you can start getting into proven to help control. ADHD is not a specific claim. It doesn't say how often it helps. Just help control. Help is a weasel word, right? And that's how those weasel words creep in, and you're going to see this in almost every advertisement. They're not going to make a specific claim. They can't guarantee it's going to work, so they have to use these weasel words to help sell their product. All right, their goal is to sell stuff. Another patient portrayal. You can start getting into some of these different things. Is Vyvanse addictive? It's a controlled substance, but because it can be abused or lead to dependence, can be, that's another weasel word. So the answer is yes, basically. They're amphetamines, so it's kind of interesting. And you can just, if you wanted to use this as a primary source, you could go through the entire website, start talking about all the different forms of doublespeak, the euphemisms, certainly the jargon and the weasel words, but also the images. What's this little design over here supposed to do for us? And they spent money on this, right? They don't just randomly put purple and green colors and circles there. They know how to use images to get us to do things. So that could be a very interesting website to get into. Where's my PowerPoint? Whoops. Also, when you do a drug, you can start going to the prescription information. Drugs.com generally has the FDA prescription things they're supposed to give to doctors. And this one's for Paxil, another antidepressant. Antidepressants in particular can be very good primary source, the advertisements for them, because they can't really guarantee to cure anybody. They tend to have some pretty serious side effects. But you could go through this entire thing. We're not gonna do that. You're gonna start seeing some jargon in here. Hypomania. Wonder what that doesn't sound good at all. Discontinuation syndrome. If you're trying to do research on a drug they're about to prescribe to you, it may be hard to read. And of course, then you're going to start getting into the math of the side effects and all the things that are happening. Let's see if we can get down here a little bit. Give me a second. Don't want to go past it. Here they're talking about obsessive OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, how often it works. And kind of notice quite often the placebo is working almost at the same rate as the medication. That's kind of almost what's happening here. But people who took Paxil, the percentage of that's minimally improved have no change or worse symptoms, 75%, right? That's a lot of people for whom the drug doesn't work for. And you can start getting into some of this using data as jargon to kind of obscure what's happening with the medication. I think I passed what I wanted to get. But they'll also list how often side effects occur and things like that. So if you want to get into this prescription information, that might be another source you use to kind of follow up on a television ad or website and get into whether or not this drug's actually working for people or not, and how often side effects occur and that kind of stuff. So don't think you have to do a political topic. Drug ads work quite well. Also, so do when bad things happen, you're going to see the jargon and euphemisms start spilling out there. Anyway, there's all kinds of other weasel words you can get into in education. We use it all the time. When you see something when we enhance our academic programs, that's a weasel word that means nothing, right? If you go to a sale in a store and it says up to 75% off, and you go there and nothing's 75% off, well, up to means from 0 to 75, right? So you're going to see these weasel words happening all the time. The last type of doublespeak is inflated language, gobbledygook, bureaucratese, just kind of piling on the language to kind of confuse or just make the reader give up on the reading. And you're going to see this quite often in different scenarios. If you've ever had to sign a license agreement to use your phone or a piece of software or a game or something, you probably didn't use it, right? You probably didn't read it. Here's one of Microsoft's. Right, nobody's going to read this just because they want to use Word or play Candy Crush or something. And generally it's going to have a lot of jargon in it because it's written by lawyers, for lawyers, to prevent lawsuits. So they don't even want you to wear it. And eventually you're just going to, if you try to read it, you're just going to wear it down and quit, right? Same way when you go to buy a car, and they start throwing that paperwork at you, and you're like, you can't read it. You just sign it anyway and hope for the best. They're doing that on purpose. They want you to quit. They're using language against you to get you to stop reading and just sign whatever they want you to sign. Same thing buying a house. Half the documents you can't even read, right? And that's kind of how bureaucraties, gobbledygook kind of work. They just want to pile on this language until you just kind of quit. we start looking at vision. Whoops, sorry. Start looking at vision statements and things like that. Northeast State shall be a premier learning centered institution whose students and graduates are among the best prepared individuals to meet current and emerging needs. What does that statement actually mean? It sounds like we're saying something. But what's the difference between a premier learning centered what's a learning centered institution anyway? What's a premier one versus a mediocre one? What's it mean for students and graduates to be among the best prepared individuals? Sounds like they're in there with the best prepared individuals serving hors d'oeuvres and mixing drinks, right? It doesn't mean you're one of them. You're just among them doing something. And how do we do that for emerging needs that we don't even know we don't even know what they are yet? So the vision statement, which we use for accreditation. Sorry, I keep hitting the button. It may not actually say a whole lot, or we may not quite be saying what we mean to say, but we're just trying to do this to impress our accrediting agency and maintain our accreditation, which is very important. For one of the journal entries, you're going to go to this notice to students, and I'm going to ask you to try and figure out what you think they're saying, and work through that inflated language, and maybe hopefully get an understanding of what they're trying to tell students. So we got the three types. Want to look at a couple of examples of all these types being used together. A while back, General Motors had some problems with the cars. If you had too much stuff on your keychain, it might accidentally turn the ignition off as you go 80 miles an hour down the interstate, which of course locks your brakes and your steering wheel, and bad things happen, and people died. And of course they had to explain all this, and it got into some very interesting doublespeak. Might make for a good essay if you could go back and find some of those documents. But again, all this doublespeak, you see this happening all the time. Eastman's never had an explosion, right? They've had some uncontrolled releases, but they'll almost never want to say the word explosion. It just has such a horrible negative connotation that they're going to start throwing euphemism and start discussing these events and using doublespeak to kind of hide what might have actually happened, or make it not seem quite so bad. And again, the idea is not that you're saying that all these sources of doublespeak are evil entities. Eastman employs plenty of people in good ways. But when something bad happens, how do they start explaining things, and what kind of language is being used? That's kind of the point of all this. And this is just a press release from General Motors. We are taking responsibility for what is happening by taking steps to treat these victims and their families with compassion, decency, and fairness. That's because they got caught. This is after they got caught and they're trying to scramble to save face and stuff. We made serious mistakes in the past, and as a result, we're making significant changes, significant being a weasel word there, right, in our company to ensure they never happen again. Ensuring doesn't mean they're going to do it. They're going to try and make sure. They're going to try their best, right? Or at least that's what they're trying to make us think. So they're talking about this faulty ignition switch. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. But down here at the bottom, we also get this qualifying statement, this forward-looking statement. And you start getting all these words. Our use of the words suspect, anticipate, possible, potential. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Or similar expressions is intended to identify forward-looking statements that represent our current judgment about possible future events. In other words, you're kind of saying like, we're done, don't hold us to our word here. We're trying to predict the future as best we can. But not really. They're trying to, up here they're trying to make it sound like they're taking definitive steps and taking no decisive action. Then you come down here and look at this statement, and it's like, well, don't hold us to this. And you start seeing these different forms of doublespeak. Among other items, such factors may include our ability to realize production efficiencies and to achieve reductions in costs as a result of our restructuring initiatives and labor modifications, our ability to maintain quality control over our vehicles and avoid material vehicle recalls, and the cost and effect on our reputation of product recalls. All of a sudden, they're moving into all this doublespeak. You're talking about firing people, right? Talking about producing a crappy car that may kill people. And it's just kind of icky when you get into something like this. So a very fascinating use of different types of doublespeak taking place there. And talking about a product flaw that killed people. Not just a small problem there. Next thing I want to show you is a outtake from John Oliver. He's a late night talk show host, and he's a comedian. He's going to talk about this GM recall and what he's seeing happening there.
Just this Friday, we learned that GM was holding meetings at the time about dealing with their defective cars. But you'll never guess what they were talking about.
These are slides from a PowerPoint presentation given in 2008. Workers were told not to use the word defect or defective, but rather does not perform to design. And GM had judgment words that were banned, including dangerous, crippling, life-threatening, hobbling, and 65 others.
How did they even come up with that list? Was it just word association at that point? Okay, everyone, say the first word that comes to mind. Cadillac XTS. Life-threatening. Perfect. The new Chevy Sonic. Crippling and dangerous. Fantastic. Keep them going. There are no bad ideas here, just bad cars. And there were... There were a lot more words on that list than just those four mentioned, because the banned words include, and I'm going to show you the document to prove that they are real as I read them. They include death trap, decapitating, grenade-like, Hindenburg, Kevorkian-esque, powder keg, rolling sarcophagus, and your toast. When demons have sex, those are their safe words. We don't technically have commercial breaks on this show, but frankly, after this, I think we all might just need one just to get away from this story altogether. So if you'll excuse us, we'll be right back.
General Motors makes cars that America can be proud of. Cars you could never describe as defective or catastrophically flawed. Gruesome, potentially disfiguring rolling sarcophagi? That's not our cars. We make sleek, non-grenade-like anti-Hindenburgs that are the very opposite of Kevorkian-esque. So why not tell your family you love them and come test drive a GM car today? Driving a GM car is so smooth, it's like butter. And you're toast. General Motors. Why walk through the valley of the shadow of death when you can drive?
So he's having a little bit of fun with that. And hopefully you're going to have maybe a little bit of fun with this essay. But again, within the essay, you're going to define doublespeak itself. You're going to define the different terms you're going to use, like euphemism, jargon, weasel words, gobbledygook. And go through your primary source and show us the different uses of those types of doublespeak within the source. So it takes looking at a few things. Drug addicts work great for this. If you go to a Weight Watchers site, or any kind of weight loss product, that can work well. Political speech works well. Anytime somebody screws up or tries to explain something to you and using doublespeak, that can be a very good potential source. Again, you don't have to feel like you don't have to say Weight Watchers is an evil organization run by Satan or something. But you want to kind of show that they have to use language to try and sell their product, and they're going to use images and euphemisms and all kinds of doublespeak kind of terms to sell their product and make money. And that's kind of the name of the game there, right? So hopefully that kind of gives you some background on doublespeak. We're going to talk about this quite a bit more when we get into class next Tuesday. But hopefully you're starting to think about possible topics, possible primary sources. And again, try and find one you're kind of interested in. If you don't like politics, don't pick on Biden or something. You're going to be bored with that. But again, drug ads work good, weight loss ads, fitness ads, all kinds of good stuff that we can use for this essay. But I'm going to hush up here. We'll see you on Tuesday, and we'll try to narrow things down a little bit then. But we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.